Although we tend to think of atheists as not only unbelieving but also hostile to religion, we should remember a tradition of atheistic thinkers who've tried to reconcile a suspicion of the supernatural side of religion with a deep sympathy for and interest in its ritualistic aspects. The most important and inspirational of these was the visionary, eccentric, and only intermittently sane French 19th century sociologist Auguste Comte. Comte was born into a strict Catholic family in Montpellier in southern France in 1798. As a young man, he received a highly progressive education and became obsessed with the idea of building a new kind of France based around science and republicanism. His family violently disagreed and broke off relations with him, so he went to live in Paris, where he became a student of and later secretary to the utopian thinker Henri de Saint-Simon. But Comte had a quarrelsome nature and fell out with Saint-Simon, failed to get a university post, and for the rest of his life maintained a precarious existence, writing dense, often unreadable works about the reform of humanity. He was not entirely sane and spent long periods in asylums, and in 1827 attempted suicide by jumping off the Pont des Arts in Paris. In 1844, he fell deeply in love with a married woman called Clotilde de Vaux, though the relationship was never consummated. After her premature death, Comte made his love for Clotilde into one of the centerpieces of his thinking on religion. Though a deeply eccentric man, Comte did manage to gain the trust and interest of the important British philosopher John Stuart Mill, who admired his efforts around religion and helped Comte to be better known in Britain. Comte's thinking on religion had as its starting point a characteristically blunt observation that in the modern world, thanks to the discoveries of science, it would no longer be possible for anyone intelligent to believe in God. Faith would henceforth be limited to the uneducated, the fanatical, women, children, and those in the final months of incurable diseases. At the same time, Comte recognized, as many of his more rational contemporaries did not, that a secular society devoted just to financial accumulation and romantic love, and devoid of any sources of consolation, transcendent awe or solidarity, would be prey to some untenable social and emotional ills. Comte's solution was neither to cling blindly to sacred traditions, nor to cast them collectively and belligerently aside, but rather to pick out their more relevant and secular aspects and fuse them together with certain insights drawn from philosophy, art, and science. The result, the outcome of decades of thought and the summit of Comte's intellectual achievement, was a new religion, a religion for atheists, or, as Comte termed it, a religion of humanity, an original creed expressly tailored to the emotional and intellectual demands of modern men and women, rather than the inhabitants of Judea or northern India in 400 BC. Comte presented his new religion in 2 volumes, The Summary Exposition of the Universal Religion and The Theory of the Future of Man. He observed that traditional faiths tended to cement their authority by providing people with daily and even hourly schedules of who or what to think about, rotas typically pegged to the commemoration of a holy individual or supernatural incident. So Comte announced a calendar of his own, animated by a pantheon of secular heroes and ideas. In the religion of humanity, every month was to be devoted to the honouring of an important field of endeavour, for example, marriage, parenthood, art, science, agriculture, and every day to an individual who had made a valuable contribution within these categories. Comte was impressed by the way that traditional religions had disseminated moral guidance, for example, dictating principles for how to conduct oneself in a marriage or fulfill one's duties to the community, and he lamented that modern liberal governments, in their desire to prove inoffensive to all constituencies, had settled on merely offering factual instruction before letting people out into the world to destroy themselves and others through their egoism and self-ignorance. Therefore, in Comte's religion of humanity, there would be classes and sermons to help inspire one to be kind spouses, patient with one's colleagues, and compassionate towards the unfortunate. Comte also recognized how badly we all need consolation and proposed that his girlfriend, Clotilde, take the function previously accorded within Catholicism to the Virgin Mary. Portraits of Clotilde were to be placed everywhere in the new religion, and when one was down, one was invited to share one's sorrows and weep in front of this vision of kindness and sympathy. Because Comte appreciated the role that architecture had once played in bolstering the claims of traditional religion, he proposed the construction of a network of secular churches, or as he called them, temples for humanity. He suggested that each one be paid for by a banker, whose bust would appear above the door in recognition of his generosity. Rather than resenting bankers, Kant thought it was wiser to coax them into supporting good causes. Inside the temples of humanity there would be lectures, singing, celebrations, and public discussions, while around the walls sumptuous works of art would commemorate the greatest moments and finest men and women of history. Finally, above the west-facing stage, there would be a large aphorism written in golden letters, invoking the congregation to adopt the essence of Kant's philosophical religious worldview. His statement, "Connais-toi pour t'améliorer," know yourself to improve yourself. Regrettably, Kant's complex, thought-provoking, and often deranged project was felled by a host of practical obstacles. Ridiculed by both atheists and believers, ignored by public opinion, devoid of funds, Kant fell into despair and self-pity. He took to writing long and frightening letters in defence of his scheme to monarchs and industrialists across Europe, including Louis Napoleon, Queen Victoria, the Crown Prince of Denmark, 300 bankers, and the head of the Paris sewage system. But few offered money, let alone replies. Without seeing any of his proposals take hold, Kant died at the age of 59 in 1857. Nevertheless, like Jesus, Kant was well served by his followers, and in the decades after his death, his religion made some notable advances. A Chapelle de l'Humanité was opened at 5 Rue de Payenne in Paris, where it still stands to this day, and became a well-known venue for secular baptisms, funeral services, weddings, and sermons. Kant's religion crossed the Channel, where it acquired 5,000 adherents, led with rare energy by a former Oxford Don. In 1878, with the help of a legacy from an aunt, this Don opened the Church of Humanity in Lamb Conduit Street in London, where secular services were held every morning. Kant's religion had even greater success in Brazil, where it was put into practice by some students that Kant had taught in Paris in the 1840s. A Templo da Humanidade opened in Rio in 1890, and others followed in Sao Paulo and Curitiba. Unfortunately, infighting among the leadership, connected to doctrinal squabbles about the place of Western authors in their liturgy, meant that the movement failed to grow into a truly popular religion, and yet it acquired a small and permanent place in Brazil's spiritual life. To this day, every Sunday morning in Rio de Janeiro, at 74 Rua Benjamin Constant, audiences who make up in intensity what they lack for in numbers arrive at the Templo da Humanidade to draw sustenance from the teachings of a Parisian sociologist's unusual secular religion. Whatever its shortcomings, Kant's religion is hard to dismiss entirely, for it identified a psychic space in atheistic society which continues to lie fallow and to invite resolution. Kant's work was an attempt to rescue some of what is beautiful, touching, reasonable, and wise from what no longer seems true. For these reasons and more, it remains extremely timely.